So this is just some footage of me doing some maintenance to the Paludarium. Um, it's gone through some changes, and due to both changes in how I'm running the tank and I've given away one of the plants in the tank, so I'm kind of like adjusting the placement of some of the plants and just like the look of the like coastline or whatever, like the where the water meets the land. Um, So it used to be that when I first got this tank, I was running a little ultrasonic mister pretty much constantly. And then I ended up not doing that just because the, there was no point. Like the tank was humid enough without it. And when I moved to the new house, I've explained this in another video, I started running that mister again because I was running the fans a lot more to cool the tank. And this house is drier, so it's drying out the tank too much. So now when the fans come on, the mister comes on as well. But during the long period of time where I wasn't running the mister, the Peperomia prostrata really grew heavily along the water's edge, like really, really heavily. And it looked really good and I liked it a lot. But then once I started running the mister, that made it too humid for the Peperomia prostrata, which is a tropical plant, but it doesn't really like it quite that wet. There's a lot of plants that don't like it quite that wet. So it started to die back. So I've removed a lot of the Peperomia prostrata from right along the water's edge. However, the Stargine repens, which is an aquatic plant, I'm not sure really if it's a truly like an aquatic plant in nature or if it's more of like a water's edge, like a riparian plant. But it really likes that environment a lot. It loves the humidity. It loves growing right along the water's edge there. So I already have quite a lot of that in the tank. So I took a bunch of little cuttings and I'm spreading them more throughout to like fill in a lot of areas where it's not. And another thing that I like about this Stargine repens is that it's like a creeping kind of plant. Like, so it sends out these pretty long, like horizontal runners, and then it'll like grow for like an inch or so, however long horizontally, and then bend up again and start growing like a new little stalk will form. And so it makes like these clumps that, especially when it's growing along the water's edge there, it kind of like it's kind of cool. It's exactly how it is in nature. So the roots of the plants grow in there, and it keeps. I can make the terrestrial portion. I can pile up the substrate higher, and since these plants are growing there, it won't like erode away into the water basically. So it kind of like makes like a natural like seawall essentially, and it kind of reinforces that coastline, which I really like a lot. Um, so that's just basically what I'm doing in this video. Oh, and then, so I had a centrally located, I had a really cool and really quite rare, I would say it was probably, when it comes to like trying to buy one or whatever, it was probably like the rarest plant I had in there. It was Catopsis, I can't pronounce the species name, Baraturania, but it's a carnivorous, or it could be debated that it's proto-carnivorous, but it's a carnivorous bromeliad, and it is again really hard to find one for sale. You can every now and then. It's kind of one of those plants that's not really rare due to like demand. It's rare due to just it's kind of like a niche plant. Like there's a lot of carnivorous plants, but just not too many carnivorous growers are into bromeliads. Not too many bromeliad like vivarium people are into carnivorous plants. So it's just kind of in this sweet spot where like no one wants it. But they're still really hard to find, and the price when you can find one is usually starting out for a small one, $75 to $100. So a fellow hobbyist, his house flooded, and he lost all of his, like a large collection of frogs and plants, and that's obviously, heartbreaking to hear about. And this guy, it just so happens that never directly, it's funny enough, he never like said he was never like, hey Frank, this is good advice, like here's some trick. But just over the years of reading his comments to other people, he's really helped me out a lot. Like he was the one that introduced me to turfus, which is a substrate. It's like a calcined clay substrate that I use for everything. We use it for every plant that we grow. We use turfus, and he's the guy that turned me on to Turfus. And there was something else that he like said in passing to someone else that I read that comment and I was like, whoa, what good advice. And so I just really value this dude's experience and knowledge. And so instead of helping him, like everyone's trying to come together and do what they can. So I noticed that at least one other hobbyist, they basically sent him some rare frogs so that he could sell those frogs and then, use that money. And so I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm going to send him this bromeliad that he could, auction off essentially and use that money to help, recover from this essentially. So that bromeliad's gone, and I wanted to cover up that it was growing on that central log there that connects the two islands, and it was growing there with some sphagnum moss and stuff. So it looks a lot more barren there, and I'm gonna put more of the S repens. Oh, and one thing that I have to consider with that area too, it's kind of finicky because the intake where the air blows in, it hits that spot right there. So that's like the single driest spot in the tank. And I've put a few types of moss there. I put the S repens there multiple times, and it's never lasted because it inevitably dries out. When even with the mist, it always dries out there. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some more Peperomia prostrata there because I know it'll do well there, and especially before it wasn't do. Not only was that the brightest spot, but that was also, I mean, the driest spot, but that was also the brightest spot in the tank too. It was where all three of the above lights constant like kind of like were hit that area, and so the prostrata really didn't like that. It doesn't really like bright light at all. The leaves get like yellow, or like if it's really bright, they'll get yellowy, and if it's kind of bright, they just won't have their cool patterning on it. Prostrata, the Peperomia prostrata, the string of turtles, it really likes like shade for it to, you know, color up to its fullest potential. So I also don't run that central light anymore. So it's dimmer there. So I believe that that's now perfect conditions for the prostrata that I would like to grow there. So I'm going to add some Peperomia prostrata to the tank, or to that spot, to fill in that spot. And then also at some point I'd like to get some sphagnum moss to fill in. I used to have a native moss species, but I want the sphagnum just because it looks, like feathery and cool. Um, so yep, that's some maintenance for this tank. I'm trying a new style of video here. Instead of just standing there with my cell phone, I'm trying some production here. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys around.